So today we're talking about fear. Now, who has a fear? Who all has fears in here? Don't be scared. Raise your hand. All right. Let me ask you. What is your fear, Savannah? Spiders? Jalen? Girls? I can imagine. Anyway. Josh, you raise your hand. What's your fear?
Oh, fear?
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Darkness, walking in the woods.
Speaks to say it probably would be that.
Deer hunting.
Yeah, I can imagine just walking and hearing something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
So let me ask you this. Do you know the difference between fear and being afraid? No? Does anybody know the difference between being fearful and being afraid? Kids, not adults.
Yeah, but
Try.
fear is a general idea. Yeah. Like a self-awareness of something. And afraid is a moment.
Afraid is in the moment. Fear is more or less long. Something else. That's good. Well, what about the Bible? What does the Bible say the difference between fear and afraid is?
Being afraid is not the best.
Yeah. So, definition of fear in the Bible: fear refers to respect, reverence, and trust. Afraid is when you don't respect, and you don't reference, and you don't trust, and you worry too much about other things. So here's your first underline, by the way, guys. There is a fear that we do not talk about enough, and it's the fear of people seeing the real me. Think about that for a second. Seeing the real me. Is there things behind doors that you don't want getting out? Is there things that you don't want your friends to, so to speak, know that you possibly do or don't do? Fear is what protects us from danger. And it also humbles us and reminds us that we're not always in control. We're not always in control, guys. Being fearful is like, how do I put this? Being fearful is like, say, I fear Raven. I fear for Raven sometimes. She's an engineer. She works around a lot of heavy equipment. I fear something might happen one day. But I trust that she's safe and God has her hand over her, that she'll be fine. That would be the definition, a biblical definition of fear. I trust that God has her. So let's look at Matthew 17, 1 through 9, and see how fear shows up in this scripture. So 6 days later, Jesus took Peter and the two brothers, James and John, and led them up a high mountain to be alone. As the men watched, Jesus' appearance was transformed, so that his face shined like the sun, and his clothes became as white as snow. Suddenly, Moses and Elijah appeared and began talking with Jesus. And Peter exclaimed, "Lord, it's wonderful for us to be here. If you want, I'll make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But even as he spoke, a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud, a loud thundering voice, said, "This is my dearly loved son, who brings me great joy. Listen to him." And the disciples were terrified. They were afraid, and they fell face down on the ground. And then after Jesus got done talking, Jesus came over and touched them and said, "Get up. Do not be afraid." And when they looked up, Moses and Elijah were gone, and they saw only Jesus. As he went back down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, "Do not tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." What do you think the loud voice was? Who do you think the loud voice was? I mean, we can only imagine, right? Well, of course it was God. Who else would be speaking through a loud, thunderous voice in clouds? So we have some pretty extraordinary things going on here. Jesus takes James, John, and Peter up the mountain to show them his glory. First, Jesus' face shined like the sun, and then clothes became white. All of this signifies the divinity of Jesus Christ. And then next, Moses and Elijah show up. Now, in the Old Testament, does anyone know anything about Moses or Elijah? No. Lord, y'all need some reading to do. Do I need to give y'all homework? Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. So their presence, Moses represents the law, and Elijah represented the prophets. And it solidified that Jesus is the Messiah and fulfills God's promises. So, I ask you, what does this have to do with fear? Anybody try to explain that? What does it have to do with fear? No one? Wow, this is sad. Do what?
Give what you gave.
I feel like that's most of the class. Anyway, we have some pretty extraordinary things. So, presence of Moses, who represents the law, and Elijah represents the prophets, solidifies that Jesus is the Messiah and fulfills God's promise. What does this have to do with fear? God taking them up to the mountain and them seeing what happened. What does this have to do with fear? Trust and respect. Trusted and respect. Yeah. Because the Bible refers to fear as trust and respect. So they trusted him and they respected everything that happened. So now, and it even says the disciples were terrified and fell down to the ground. They were afraid because they didn't know what was happening, what was going on, who was talking to them through a cloud. But Jesus told them not to be afraid, or they knew who it was. They were just scared. They didn't know at the time. So God's power is so overwhelming that it fills us with fear. We're reminded that we are not in control when we are in his presence. With the fear of God comes respect. The problem is, many of us don't fear God. Or at least we act that way. Let's just face it, we don't fear him like we should. We don't. But instead, we fear things like failure to reach goals, failure to, say, pass class or pass nursing exams. Ain't that, Kelly? Rejection from others. Scared of what your friends might think of you and whether they'll abandon you for doing, say, following God. Isolation and loneliness, which again, rejection from others can cause isolation and loneliness. Because, for instance, example, I had many friends in high school before I came to know Christ. And once I finally came to know Christ, which it took me a while to get there because rejection from others. I was scared to be rejected. I was scared to lose who I thought was friends. But I finally follow Christ. And I said, if they want to be my friend, they'll stay around. They'll respect that and trust. No, I got rejected. So I started getting lonely, of course. So I lost my way. But I got back into it. We come to Coldwater and found Josh, Brittany, and Philip, Rachel, Drew. Everyone here just helped me get back into it and just finally move past all the loneliness and the rejection that I got in the past. But because of all these the failure of our goals, rejection, and loneliness, as a result, we orient our lives on that and our goals and focus on those things only. So we're too busy trying to aim for perfection and the approval of others. And while it's essential to do our best and get along with others, when we prioritize those things above God, we miss out on a full life. And instead, we need to align our goals with God's will. Once we do that, we will never fail. Remember that God's love is unconditional. We will never fear rejection because God and Jesus are always there for us. We're never rejected by them. And we also need to recognize that God is always present, preventing us from feeling so isolated. If you ever feel lonely or isolated, go pray. Pray to God and ask Him, Lord, please comfort me. I don't feel like someone is here. I feel rejected. I feel lonely. He will help. He will help you. When we recognize the power of God's glory, the power of fear has no hold on our life. We recognize the power of God's glory, power of fear has no hold on your life. That's awesome. That sentence right there just sums it up. His glory is so plentiful that fear is not, you don't even feel fear. It's as if it doesn't exist. It's not part of your life. We must recognize that Jesus' glory is that big and nothing is more powerful than God. Repeat that. Nothing is more powerful than God. Not the devil, not his followers, not social media, not pornography, not anything else you can think of is powerful than God. Not even death. Obviously, not even death. Jesus rose from the grave. There's no way. When we realize that God is more significant than our fears, we can remove the filters that hold us back from doing what we've been called to do. How many of you tonight feel like you guys have a filter? And you're living with a filter because you fear that you'll get rejected. I mean, be honest. Just raise your hand. Me. I'll be the first one. Guys, you don't have to feel rejected. You don't have to feel lonely. Come find me. Come find Brittany. I'm sure Raven, Callie, Josh House, Drew Parrish, David Slocum, new guy. Come find us. We will pray with you. We will talk with you. And it stays with us. It doesn't go with anyone else. And we will go to God in prayer. And He'll help us out. If you feel that way tonight, let us know.